Who is the Broncos running back to play, if any, with now Chase Edmonds in the backfield in Denver? Which tight end is going to stand out in that Bills and Jets game? Is it going to be Tyler Conklin or is it going to be Dawson Knox? Both, neither. We're going to talk about that. And is one backup running back on an average team actually the better play in week 9 than a starter on his own team? Plus, the 32-time FFPC and Football Guys Players Championship League winner, John Terry, rejoins the program to talk about whether Derek Carr is going to bounce back in week 9 against Jacksonville, whether Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be in lineups this weekend, and much more. We got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Hey, Rob, greetings and salutations to all of you Bulkaholics and Farelliacs tuning in. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, aka the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is indeed the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, the one, the only, the Farrell Elliott. Farrell, welcome in. Here we are, week 9 of the FFPC and KFFSC. I haven't made up my mind yet because I've had people tell me, oh, it's going by so fast. And then I think about, everything that the FFPC and the KFFSC has going on. And I'm like, maybe it's not going that fast. I don't know. How's it been for you?
It's fast for me.
Fast, okay.
But sometimes when you're doing well, you can't get it over fast enough. So if you're doing well, it might be that it's going slow. And if you're not doing well, it's going fast. You've got limited time to catch up. I keep reminding myself that we have, we used to have an 11-week season, as I recall, in the FFPC. Now it is a 12-week season. So you have an extra week to load up on your punts, or your players and make a difference. But, Balky's, a lot of the questions and a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how to eke out those last few remaining points. And it's what it always comes down to, the difference between winning or losing. Tonight we're talking to a man that has had so much success in fantasy football, and he's probably got so many stories where he was almost there with other teams that he just didn't make it with. And it always comes down to the moves you make in these weeks. Very, very important time of the season.
I always bring this up too. John Terry, who is tonight's guest, who'll be talking to you in about less than 15 minutes, actually, finished with 2 top 10 Football Guys Players Championship teams last season, which is an incredible achievement. So we'll talk about that. And he's got a top 20 team this season. You can say what you will about that, but that's an incredible achievement to go back-to-back, to have a top 20 team out of nearly 15,000 teams. I don't know how he does it. We're going to try to pick his brain. We'll see what he gives up tonight on how he's been able to do it. That's all coming up on tonight's show. We're also going to debate whether Cam Akers' return to practice changes how we think about Darrell Henderson. Spoiler alert, it may not. And we'll talk about why Justin Fields might be the guy this week over Tom Brady. Then, as Farrell alluded to, the 32-time FFPC and Football Guys redraft and dynasty champion, John Terry, is going to talk to us about whether he thinks you need to bite the bullet and play Damian Harris in a bye week or a bye-apocalypse, bye-mageddon in week 9, whether you need to bite the bullet and play Damian Harris this week, and whether TJ Hawkinson is actually a must start now that he is on the move from Detroit to Minnesota, now in the nation's capital, which is where the Vikings are going to play the Commanders this week. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, please do so. The show is at HSFF, or I am at Eric Balkman, and always check out Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. Facebook is where you can connect with us, facebook.com/HSFF hour to be specific. You can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. So if you have any questions for us, now is the time to send those in. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, all your tweets, and all your emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend, Bryce, and of course, our producer and mutual friend, Rob. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge this week, ladies and gentlemen. No draft, no salary cap, just choose 10 or 12 players by Sunday's kickoff. Remember, you can only pick one player per team. You want to play the slim format, there's no kickers or defenses. If you want to play the 12-player format, that's with kickers and defenses. You can play either one. MyFFPC.com, you can play for as little as $35 or as much as $200. 30-team contest, 100-team contest. And don't forget, you can play for a 2023 FFPC main event entry if you want to play in the $200 10-team format. So if you beat those other 9 players out, you can play for $1 million next year with your winnings. That is pretty awesome. We encourage that kind of behavior over at myffpc.com. In case you missed the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown this week, check out rotoviz.com/podcast or the FFPC YouTube channel. Greg Pignatelli, a former guest of this show, he appeared on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown this week. We hopefully helped you out with your waivers and are helping you out with the Week 9 lineups that you have in front of you, which is what Farrell, myself, and John Terry are going to help you do tonight. Remember, if you are watching this, remember to like, subscribe to the channel, comment on the videos, share the videos, and get notified. The more you do that, the better the channel becomes, the better content and the more content we can give you going forward. So make sure you are doing that. All right, let's get into it on a special trade deadline episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Footballer. Big time stuff this week, as it's been kind of old hat the last few years, Farrell. We've seen more and more trades done at the NFL trade deadline, and maybe arguably the biggest one was Chase Claypool going from Pittsburgh to Chicago this past week in exchange for a 2023 second-round pick, according to Field Yates on Twitter. Now, Ian Rappaport, I think the early reports on this said that the pick was going to be the Baltimore second-round pick that the Bears acquired in the Roquan Smith deal. That wasn't the case. It's going to be the Bears second-round pick. And Claypool is obviously going to be in the top 2 receiver conversation in Chicago. You can make the case that he might even be the number 1 receiver here before season's end, ahead of Darnell Mooney. That's going to increase his volume, you would think, over what he was doing in Pittsburgh. I know he'd been coming on lately, but certainly a lot of the conversation coming out of Pittsburgh was that George Pickens was going to be the number 2 there over Chase Claypool. You look at Chicago, we'll get into some Justin Fields stuff coming up later on in the show, but they have been throwing the ball a little bit more. I talked to the Dizzle this week, Farrell, the day after the trade deadline, and he was shocked. In fact, I believe the word he used was fleece. He believes the Steelers fleeced the Bears for a second-round pick in exchange for Chase Claypool. Your response to that?
Well, it is difficult on the FFPC network to contradict the Dizzle, but since he probably has put all of his activity into listening to the RotoViz shows this week, we'll just go ahead over here and say what we think. And Dizzle, I saw that Rappaport made some equally disparaging comments about the trade and about Clay. And Rappaport went further than the Dizzle. He managed to insult St. Brown, N'Keal Harry, and Claypool all in the same paragraph. So and it amazes me. First thing that Rappaport said, can't believe gave up a draft pick for a player that's never gained 1,000 yards. Well, he's been sharing time with Juju Smith-Schuster, been sharing time with Johnson in Pittsburgh, and then 2 rookie in his second year, he approached 900 yards, and one of them he got 9 touchdowns. What does he bring to the Chicago Bears? He brings a real receiver, a real target receiver in a league now that has elongated defensive backs who can separate receivers like Mooney from the ball. What will he mean for existing Bears like Mooney? And Mooney has now got an opportunity to set himself free. You didn't have to roll safeties to Mooney because he wasn't that physical of a presence, and he runs good routes and he has excellent speed, but Fields has got some delivery issues with the ball. So what it becomes now is he gets a big target in Claypool. Fields is coming together in the last 2 weeks. He's extending the plays, and when you do that, it will give time. It will give time for Mooney to get open, and Claypool will be the target that can win the contested ball. So I think it's a wonderful acquisition. Claypool is only 24 years old. Has played in very good health in the league, and has caught in a difficult situation. He's made the most of it over the last 2 years. It's a good thing for the Bears. And in a receiving year, a draft forthcoming, and all of our dynasty players that listen to this, the scouting word in the NFL is this year's draft class at the wide receiver position is awful thin. So it makes sense to me if you can get a player like this into your roster, not only for this year, but for the future.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you saying that this is good not only for Claypool, but good for Mooney and Fields as well?
Oh yeah, and Fields is beginning to get it. He's got a long way to go, and I'll tell you what else Claypool brings to the field for the quarterback. Claypool's willing to block. He's willing to block that edge guy, and he's willing to knock that safety around. Now these yards that Fields puts together, I mean, he's possibly on position to challenge 1,000 yards this year. Probably won't get it, but statistically he could legitimately challenge that number. And that number becomes important only when he starts running for touchdowns. So when he gets in the red zone and Claypool can occupy players and clear out an area of the field where Justin Fields can then do his thing, it elevates the Bears significantly here.
We like to get into the minutia on this show, and we're going to get into the minutia now with Chase Edmonds, this deal here. The Broncos end up getting Chase Edmonds here from the Dolphins. This was all part of the Bradley Chubb trade. Now, Bradley Chubb, obviously from a real football standpoint, that's what we should be focused on. We don't focus on real football necessarily on the show. We focus on the fantasy aspect of it. So now the Denver backfield, which we thought was going to be Javonte Williams all the way this season, has now devolved into Latavius Murray, into Melvin Gordon, and now Chase Edmonds. He has 0 10-carry games since the start of the season, just 41 rushing yards over his last month plus of action in the NFL. Now, you can't really say that Edmonds is going to be the number one guy there. I don't see that happening. I don't think the Broncos see that happening as well. And let's face it, Nathaniel Hackett hasn't gone out of his way to declare a Chase Edmonds-led backfield thus far. Latavius Murray last week had 14 carries. You would think that he is probably still the guy that you want to start in this backfield until any of these guys steps forward. But Farrell, I guess the question here is, until any of these guys step forward, is there anybody that you want to be starting even in week 9 when you have 6 teams on bye?
Well, yeah, and isn't Denver one of them?
You know what? As soon as I said that, I thought that they might be, and they indeed are.
Denver is one of them.
Browns, hold on. Browns, Cowboys, Broncos, Giants, Steelers, and Niners.
And since the Broncos are in Denver, they will not be playing football this week. Edmonds is an excellent player. They were looking for that third down pass catching back. It now becomes confusing for a very, very short time. All us Melvin Gordon owners that are patting ourselves on the back for our 9th, 10th, and 11th round pick of Melvin. We were very, very proud of ourselves for about 2 weeks there. And I still think he's the talent at the position. But from a fantasy perspective, it's going to be very, very difficult to get with this team, a team that loves to run the ball, but a quarterback who is now getting it based on his last game that he had in London. Things are coming together there. So let's see if we can get some direction after the bye week. But this situation has become even more vexing than perhaps even Baltimore's at this time.
Farrell, do you have to find a way, if you have Murray, if you have Gordon, if you have Edmonds, you got to find a way to keep all these guys on your roster until we get some more clarification coming up in week 10, right?
Yeah, chances are you've got 2 of them. I've got a team with Gordon and Murray, and I can foresee in the near future when I have to start them that the chances of me picking the wrong one are greater than 50-50. But, tip of the cap to Murray, who I thought belonged in the league, And he's proved that upon his return that he's every bit as good a player as he was when he left it.
We have John Terry, the 32-time FFPC and Football Guys League winner, coming up. Before we get to him, I think we should bring this up. People who have watched the show, listened to the show, Farrell, are well aware of our proclivities to Darrell Henderson and how we feel about him in Los Angeles. But I should bring this up because Cam Akers was not dealt at the NFL trade deadline. And in fact, he has returned to practice as of yesterday for the Los Angeles Rams. Akers
welcomed back with open arms from his teammates,
right,
which is very important.
Akers said, I never asked to not be a part of the team. I never asked to not play. I never asked to not practice. Take that for what you will, whatever. But as you said, Farrell, it sounds like the Rams are embracing Cam Akers coming back to the team. He has not played since week 5, and it sounds like he could be a factor even right away in week 9 for this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, as of this airing, the Rams have still not activated Kyron Williams off IR, their 5th round pick from Notre Dame. They already have Darrell Henderson. Ronnie Rivers got some run this past week. Malcolm Brown seemingly always in the mix for some NFL team.
God bless him.
God bless him. He is carving out his career. We root for him here on the HSFF Hour. How has Akers' return affected how you might deploy Darrell Henderson in your lineups this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Has it shifted it at all? Is it a non-factor or is it a significant factor?
I think it's too early for this week. Henderson to me remains. Yes, everyone knows that I like Henderson for this position. I like him better than everybody, including the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams gave the job to Cam Akers, Balky. If you remember at the end of July and the 1st of August, we're talking about how Cam Akers is the guy. And I think he was given the job without earning it. But he came in and he was banged up, and so they played Henderson, and Henderson played well. And we talk about how the responsibility of the football team is much more than just the players on the field. We talk at length about the trainers in the training room, and there's a disagreement about this player's progress through training. He said he didn't ask not to practice. If that's a complete sentence, I don't know, but in other words, he's saying it's not his responsibility that he didn't practice. That's coming from the training room. Then we talk about trading, and I think it's important to remember that Les Snead's the general manager here. So what is he going to trade him for, a 5th or a 6th round draft pick, which other general managers probably find value in for a running back? That's what they would bring on the open market. But Snead finds value in none of his draft picks, so he doesn't want to welcome that. So he welcomes Cam Akers back because that's his alternative, and they're restarting the situation. And Henderson will continue to do what he does when given the opportunity. And Akers can continue to try and impress us. It was 46 yards in the Super Bowl that he gained. And I think the Rams have proven that they can win the highest honor in football without him being the stud running back. And I don't think they're built that way. Consequently, if you drafted him, was he a 3rd round draft pick, Balky?
Early on, yes, but he slipped quite a ways after the opening game in the season.
And I knowing I could get Henderson, I never considered drafting him, and for those that did, they probably wish they hadn't. You know, you were better off to draft Elijah Mitchell, who was hurt for the entirety of the season, because you couldn't start Mitchell, but you could start Akers for a few weeks, and that hurt even more.
We have a great question, a fantastic question from Don Crypto here in the YouTube chat. Before we get to it, because Farrell, I think my brain and your brain, this question is bigger than it. We need a 3rd brain in on this. And who better to bring in as the big brain on the show tonight than tonight's guest? He is a longtime FFPC player. He's notched almost a dozen high-stakes dynasty titles over the course of his career. Last year, in 2021, this is not a career thing. This is just last year. More than $70,000 in winnings. He's here to talk about week 9 in high-stakes fantasy football. We're going to talk about Kadarius Toney, the new Kansas City Chief. We're going to talk about Romeo Doubs going up against a historically bad Detroit defense this week. We're going to talk about Taysom Hill going on Monday Night Football in a game that Mark Andrews might not play. Is he a nice pivot? Is he more than that? That's all coming up right now. Please welcome back onto the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, Mr. John Terry. John, thank you
There
once
he
again
is.
for spending your Friday night with us, man. Good to have you on.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you guys again.
All right, so let's throw it out here right away from Don Crypto. I wish I had this team, but he only has 2 flex spots available, and he's got 4 guys. It's Deontay Foreman. Bear in mind, Chuba Hubbard has already been ruled out. He's got Josh Palmer. Bear in mind, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are already out. He's got Gabe Davis, who is an awesome receiver for the Bills, and Jonathan Taylor ruled out. He's got Deion Jackson as well. He's got to sit 2 of those guys. Farrell, I'm going to throw it to you right away. Quite frankly, I'm lost on this. Which 2 guys are you sitting? I'm assuming full PPR here. You got to pick 2. Foreman, Palmer, Gabe Davis, and Deion Jackson.
There's nothing better than being an opening act for a Hall of Famer. It's very much in the music business, and nobody expects anything from the opening act. And John Terry's answer will be based John, in my conversations with you, you've always provided compelling reasons for the players to be drafted, and you've stayed consistently on that for years. And your answer is going to probably be much more layered and specific than mine. But Foreman, you must play based on his productivity. And Gabriel Davis, you must play, even if you think Palmer is an upside receiver in that game. Davis, you must play because Davis has no issues with his quarterback's health, and Palmer does. We just don't know how healthy Herbert is. So I'm saying Davis and Foreman. That's an easy question, and Don Crypto's just showing off because that's what he's doing there. He's bragging about his free agent acquisitions, and but that's okay because you can do that on the show.
All right, so Farrell, just real quick again. You said who are the 2 starters?
Oh, my guys are Foreman and Davis. Easy.
Foreman and Davis.
I think this is easy.
Okay, so it's easy for Farrell. He says Foreman and Davis. Now, Hudson Kern-Reeve weighing in on this. He says it's Deion Jackson and Gabe Davis. I'm going to weigh in. I'm going to say Gabe Davis and Deontay Foreman. So, John Terry, how do you sit on this? Foreman, Palmer, Gabe Davis, Deion Jackson. Pick 2 to start.
It's a challenging question because I like all those guys.
Mhm.
You own a lot of those players. For me, I would go Foreman and Palmer.
Foreman and Palmer. So 4 great minds, and we're all going different ways on this.
No, I'm with you, Balky. I'm Foreman and Davis.
Foreman and okay, so Foreman it is.
Yeah,
Okay, go.
I just think the Chargers matchup is too good. And I mean, everybody's hurt, and we found out like even DeAndre Carter might not play today. So, I mean, all those receiving guards are going to be split up between Gerald Everett, Josh Palmer, and Eckler. That's pretty much all they have.
Right.
Austin Eckler's going to catch 20 passes. And there's superstars brewing on that practice squad, John, that are just flying, man. They're going across country, and they're waiting to be given a jersey, just like Tegan Quintoriano from the Houston Texans last night. Touchdown in his first play as an NFL player. It was his first catch. They're out there. They'll be there.
Well,
They got guys.
Nobody drafted more Gabe Davis than I did, but
Yeah.
he's inconsistent. So you just never know what you're going to get there.
Yeah, it's crazy because you have a situation here where so Taylor has officially been ruled out, right? And
Yep.
Keenan Allen's officially been ruled out. So we're not dancing around anymore. Like, we'll know where these guys are going. I'm kind of, I understand the argument for Gabe Davis too. Like, we saw on Sunday Night Football, Jair Alexander, Joe Barry, the defensive coordinator for Green Bay, decided to split up Alexander and Stokes on opposite sides of the field rather than matching up, with one player or the other. And Alexander was on Davis. He caught like 2 passes. I think while Alexander was guarding him, Davis didn't catch anything at all. And Buffalo this week gets the who do they? It's the Jets, right? It's a 1 o'clock game. Yeah, Jets. Okay, so that could be a Sauce Gardner on Stephon Diggs. We shall see on that. I don't know how they're going to be deployed.
Oh yeah, that's what it's going to be. Okay,
so there you go. On that, it's going to be crazy. And I I mean, are we rolling the dice on Deion Jackson here at all? I mean, like, he's going to be the guy, right? Is there any doubt, John, in your mind that Jackson's going to be the guy who's get the line share of the touches for Indy?
No. I mean, I have a ton of Deion Jackson, and I'm playing him almost everywhere. I don't have many teams where I have that kind of a decision. And I like Jackson. It's just not overly confident in the Colts. And he put up that good game last time, which was great from a fantasy perspective, but it was like 10 catches for 79 yards. It wasn't like he was a superstar. He just got a lot of volume, which I think he'll get again, but I don't know that his ceiling's all that high.
It may not be. I always bet on volume too. And I know in Kentucky this week in the leagues that Deion Jackson was available, I struck out on pretty much every league, not because I wasn't aggressive, but because I didn't have a lot of money. The one league I did have enough cash, I overbid on him and I got him. And that was the league I happened to have Jonathan Taylor on. So thank you for bringing Deion Jackson to that squad, because Lord knows I needed him. I want to stick with the Indianapolis conversation to begin our interview tonight, John, because Alec Pierce last week, 3 catches, 65 yards on 5 targets. This is Sam Ellinger's debut. This is the post Matt Ryan era now in Indianapolis, which I don't know if you guys saw this. Somebody said this on Twitter, and I wanted to say it was something like Matt Ryan's tenure in Indianapolis was 28 weeks and 3 days. 28 weeks and 3 days. 28-3. Matt Ryan.
My goodness.
He cannot get away from it. So bizarre. So wild that it happened. Well, we'll move on past that. Alec Pierce this weekend. Again, this is going to be a recurring theme on the show, John. 6 teams on bye this week. Alec Pierce, is he a good, comfy flex for you this week in New England?
Yeah, I think given how many teams are off, I mean, you can do a lot worse. I mean, I think they have potential with the new quarterback, and I also think, with the new QB, Pierce is probably like now he's moved up my list, and Pittman's moved down, and they're probably fairly close to each other now. So yeah, I don't mind starting Pierce this week.
John, how much Derek Carr do you have?
Do I have to answer that question?
Yes, sir, you do. I need to find someone, a more prolific player than I, who has the same percentage of ownership of Derek Carr.
Gosh, if Balky were to look up my stats on the site right now,
I'll look it up right now.
I think he'll see that I have way more Derek Carr than anybody else. I kind of think I have 29 teams with Derek Carr as a QB.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's we have one thing to be grateful for as Derek Carr supporters. We got a little support early, but what we have to be grateful for was the early bye week, because it was forced before most teams. And I like to start the season with one quarterback. I was forced to find a second quarterback early, and players available were Geno Smith, and now an elevated Jimmy Garoppolo due to the changes in his roster. And there were others, but Geno Smith was the one that I could get most often. Derek Carr, 13, 15, and 3.9 his last few times out. That's 31 points over the last 3 games. And you look at teams and you say, geez, if I just had 20 out of my quarterback, I would have something. I would have another 30 points. I'd be right in the thick of things. I would have a better feel about my team. Are you going in your teams to move off of Carr this weekend's matchup in Jacksonville? Are you going to move off of Carr to other quarterbacks that are either rostered or some, and there's not a lot of great names out there, but some that you can pick up off of free agency? Or do you believe that the quarterback rights the ship the rest of the way? And I'll give you one caveat. What makes me very, very happy that I have other quarterbacks is I look at what the Raiders done, but I also look at what they have in front of them, and it's not the easiest path to fantasy success for a quarterback.
Yeah. Well, I'll add that I'm typically always a 2 QB drafter versus a 1 QB, and especially my my teams where I have Derek Carr are the ones where I waited on QB,
Yes.
and I didn't take anyone in the early round. So I pretty much always double up around the same area. So I will say that on most of my teams, I've already gone away from Carr. And amongst all my teams where I have him this week, I think the only guy I'm playing Carr over is Stafford.
Will he be a victim of the waiver wire for you in the next couple weeks?
Not for me, not yet. Only because I'm not comfortable carrying one guy, especially when we get to the playoffs, and there's literally like no one available. I'm not going to drop him to pick up like Zach Wilson or something.
Zach's there, man. Zach's there. Outscored Carr last week. Got 6 points.
Yeah, but something is just not right with that Raiders offense, and I don't know. I don't see it improving.
At least with the passing offense, I mean, Josh Jacobs has been great.
Oh yeah.
But you're right.
I do see it improving, but I don't know if he can get to 20, 25 points a game like what we saw promise of in the first 3 games of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because like when it was draft season, it was like, okay, now let me see how many guys I can draft from the AFC West to get a hold of all these shootouts. And now you got the Raiders and the Broncos who just never showed up, and the Chargers who are just hurt, and Herbert looks like a shell of himself. And you pretty much just have the Chiefs.
Yes.
I have not crunched the numbers on this, guys, but I do know this. Devontae Adams so far this season has had a game with 3 catches. He's had another game with just 2 catches and 1 game with 1 catch. I cannot remember a span when he was a Green Bay Packer where that happened. It blows my mind. I never thought it would happen, but yet here we are in week 9, and we're talking about Devontae Adams having 3 games with 3 or fewer catches. It's unbelievable. By the way, John Terry, 32 of your teams have Derek Carr on them. I don't know if that makes you feel better. Probably not, but it is the God's honest truth right now. Yeah. So that's what we're looking at with Derek Carr. All right, on to some like we tried to tackle the trade deadline in the opening part of the show. We didn't get to everything, so let's start tackling some of these other guys that moved teams and switched jerseys on Tuesday. Nyheim Hines goes from Indianapolis to Buffalo right at the trade deadline. John, how does his role change? Does it change at all? Is he simply going to be a more supercharged version of Nyheim Hines in Buffalo as opposed to Indianapolis now?
Yeah, I think that's pretty well put. I don't think his role changes, but I mean, he was in Indianapolis, which is a bad offense that's not going to be near the goal line that often. He goes to Buffalo, who's going to have a lot more scoring opportunities, and he was behind Jonathan Taylor, and now he's behind Devin Singletary. So I think his value has gone up, and I mean, I think they've been looking for a pass catching back for a while. I think Singletary's been that guy by default. We've seen a little bit of Cook lately, but I think he's going to get into that role and start running some more underneath patterns, and will have more value.
John, this is one of those, for me, one of those shut up and listen questions, because I can talk about Derek Carr all day, but I have nothing compelling to add about Clyde Edwards-Helaire other than I never can figure out exactly what to do with him. This weekend, he gets the Tennessee Titans. Flashes some really good things. For me, it's always, well, I guess I need to start him next week, but next week never comes. What's your take on this player?
Yeah, he's another guy I drafted too much of. As opposed to some other guys, I mean, I'm looking at when I'm setting my lineups, I'm looking at my teams with my KC running backs, and I'm looking for ways to get them all on my bench.
Donk Crypto didn't even ask us about Clyde Edwards. I'm sure he's on his team too. I'm sure he's over there.
But I mean, it's pretty much being split 3 ways now, and they don't use the running backs all that much. So, I mean, if McKinnon's going to continue to catch some passes and the other stuff is split between Clyde and Pacheco, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to play Clyde. I mean, you just have to luck into a touchdown to get points.
Balky, and John, my esteemed and beloved partner in the FFPC play, Trevor Holt, points out that Rashid Shaheed could be a developing Charger you should get for your lineups. I could not pull up my my depth chart on the Chargers, but that's one of the more promising athletic receivers that I saw in that group of angular receivers that the Chargers seem to love.
No,
I think as I look at tonight's emails, let's put a pin in the Chargers receiver conversation because I think it's important. But I do want to touch on some other stuff before we get there. Okay, another trade that went down. One of the first ones before the trade deadline. The Giants send their first round pick from last year, Kadarius Toney. He goes to Kansas City now, and shockingly or unshockingly, the hamstring is miraculously healed on the flight from New York to Kansas City, and God bless him. God is a wonderful being. So now it seems like Toney is going to be ready to go this week. I think we can all agree that it's kind of semi-desperation if you're going to play Toney this week. I know with the bipocalypse upon us, you might be forced into it, but let's look at this from a more season-long aspect here, John Terry. What do you think Toney is for Kansas City? How does he affect the fantasy whims of, Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling? How does he affect those guys? What is he going to be the rest of the season?
Yeah, well, I think all the current KC receivers are pretty much just guys, and they have value because they're in that offense and they have Mahomes there. And I think if I were to look at the KC receivers and I'm planning for, the fantasy playoffs, I think the guy that I want before anyone else is Toney because I think he's more talented than any of those other guys that they have. He's the only guy that has the potential to be a monster come playoff time. And it's amazing, how much happier he's likely to be now being in KC versus New York with a fresh start.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Here's something that I've got to get your opinion on because I really like this player, running back Harris from New England. But it's been the Ramondre Stevenson show, and at a time when the quarterback has struggled, whichever one is out there, Stevenson has been the fantasy answer for the New England Patriots. Is there a situation, and is it this weekend, where you would ever put Harris into your lineup if he's on your roster?
Well, I mean, I guess if everybody else is on bye on your then I would. But I think he's still banged up and he's sick. I don't even think we know for sure if he's playing this weekend. Last I saw, latest news today. And if he is in, I still think, it's going to be probably 80% Ramondre with him picking up a little bit of the slack. So I wouldn't want to play him if I could avoid it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's just like, is he viable? Well, depending upon how desperate your running back and flex situation is, yeah, he could be viable. But, man, you cannot – there's no one – Damian Harris's mom would not want to put Damian Harris in her starting lineup this week. That's just the way it is, even with 6 teams on bye. So I think you got to look elsewhere, even though he still factors into that backfield somewhat. Let's talk about Detroit and Green Bay. You're talking about an historically bad defense in the Detroit Lions. You're talking about a Green Bay defense that has been historically underperforming, given that they have 6 number 1 picks on that defense and also soaked a ton of cash into guys like Devondre Campbell and Rasul Douglas here. So maybe we're looking at a shootout, John. Maybe we're looking at, blasting through that 48.5, 49.5, whatever the total is on that game. So knowing that is a distinct possibility, what do you do with a guy like Romeo Doubs? Again, not like plan A for anybody this week, but certainly a guy who has been involved in that Green Bay passing offense, could be more involved in that Green Bay Packers passing offense this weekend. Do you have to find a way to get Doubs in as one of your flexes and football guys in the FFPC main event in Week 9?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think with Green Bay, I mean, I'm doing the opposite as, from the KC running backs, and I'm looking for ways to get the Green Bay guys into my lineups. I think I saw where Lazard's going to be a game time decision. So if I have Dobbs, I have Tanyan, I have Aaron Jones, like I'm hoping I can find ways so none of those guys are on my bench this week.
And Lazard, yeah, that's what's interesting about this is so obviously Lazard is the guy that everybody wants to play. Hurts his shoulder, does not play in that Buffalo game. And if he does play, he's probably going to be beat up to a certain extent. And say what you will about Romeo Dobbs, he's a rookie, he's still learning it. Rodgers doesn't trust him, but if you watch those games, like I have, unfortunately, as a Packers fan this year, they are scheming him in. They're finding ways, whether it's a wide receiver screen, whether it's getting him the ball in space, like he is still getting schemed into the game plan. Something to remember too, and I haven't gotten the latest on Christian Watson. I know he's still in the concussion protocol, but he was practicing in pads. One of the undersold aspects of that Packers game was they had a ton of plays in for Christian Watson this past week, and he goes out with a concussion, but halfway through the first quarter, and then the Packers had to scramble, right? And I think they don't want to be caught in that same situation again, which is why you'd have Romeo Dobbs involved. So if you do have Tunyon, yes, FFPC tight end premium, you got to find a way in. You're already playing Aaron Jones. Dobbs is interesting, but I think Dobbs still, for me, is going to be started in the leagues I have him in, Farrell. I'm going to look for reasons to try to sit him because otherwise he's going to be in my starting lineup.
Makes sense to me, Balky. Exiting Detroit this week was a certain tight end that I have had a lot of admiration for that certainly had one outlier game this year. And I've been curious what he could do in a different situation, and that's TJ Hawkinson. I think with the landing spot in the trade is what amazed everyone, an interdivisional trade, somewhat unusual, but nevertheless, John, the first question I have, were you ever an Irv Smith guy? Were you ever particularly high on the Viking tight end Irv Smith?
I wasn't. I mean, he was a guy that was on my list that I drafted a fair amount this year. Yeah, thinking he was going to break out. So
never a player on my list. Was he injured this year? He seems often injured.
He is now.
And he was coming into the season coming off a pretty significant knee injury.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he's been banged up a little, but he also, like, even when healthy, was disappointing this year.
Exactly, and he's been a confusing player, but I tried not. What did we say as fantasy players? We stick with our gut sometimes, and my gut said no Irv Smith, and I think that in Minnesota. This trade goes beyond the health of Irv Smith to an upgrade at the position. Many times we say, well, let's see how he settles in. Let's see how the player. I think this is a marvelous fantasy acquisition for both Cousins and Hawkinson. And we can blow the roof off some fantasy scoring for both these players, especially with the fact that there's another big fantasy player in that receiving arsenal in Minnesota that has a history of getting banged up as we move into double-digit games, that being Thielen. So I'm very, very bullish on Hawkinson where I got him. I'm really thrilled about the prospects of my teams, but it's making me look at Cousins a little differently too. Your thoughts on Hawkinson? Are you as predicting a rosy picture as I am?
Yeah, I am. I think it's an upgrade for sure for Hawkinson. And I mean, even in Detroit, I mean, I don't think Detroit used Hawkinson all that well this year. I mean, he basically had one big game where he had like 35 points, and like the rest of the games, he's been very mediocre. So I do like it. I don't know that I love it this week. I don't know at tight end, like if you can come in, be traded in same week and really have all the plays down and the routes and the timing with the QB and everybody in week one. I mean, I think he'll play. I think he'll do something, but I think it'll probably take him a week or two to really, really get up to speed.
I think I'm with you, and what you're saying makes sense. That said, let me throw this at you. feel free to disagree with me. I think because of tight end being once again a wasteland for the umpteenth year in a row, I am rolling the dice on a guy like Hawkinson. I don't want to have to dumpster dive on the Jawan Johnsons and Greg Dulcich actually would be a pretty good play this week had they not been on bye. Right? Yeah.
Augie, you're trying to get Denver on the schedule.
That's the thing. Like it's the Cortland Sutton in me. I have so many problems at receiver. I need Sutton out there, and
Saskatchewan is not playing this weekend either. Maybe you can put them together there.
I would love that, but I don't think I have the pull. Maybe you can get on that, Farrell. Maybe you have that kind of pull.
Too late.
CFL.
Should have talked to me Thursday.
But I mean, the thing is, like, when you talk about Jawan Johnson or Hunter Henry, Cade Otton, Cole Kmet, I mean, whatever. Like, I would much rather if any of those guys are my backup to Hawkinson, I'm still going to roll the dice with Hawkinson.
You just threw out all of John's sleepers.
Yeah. Well, I'm just telling you right now, like yes, those guys do have some upside, but I'm going to roll the dice with Hawkinson instead. My personal opinion, and we'll see if it plays out. Now, I want to go back, guys, to something we talked about probably about 10 minutes or so ago, and that's the Chargers receivers because it leads into the first email we have for John tonight. Now, Gary in Brooklyn has this to say: is DeAndre Carter a viable starter this week if Keenan Allen misses in addition to Mike Williams? Thanks, John. That is Gary in Brooklyn. Gary, thank you for writing it. Now, we do know that Keenan Allen is out, but as John so astutely pointed out earlier in the program, DeAndre Carter might not play this week. Now, Farrell, you brought up, I think it was Trevor Holt said.
I'm bringing up New Orleans receivers to be moved. So I mean, I can't even get in the right conference. So don't pay any attention to me.
Okay, all right. So here's where we're at, John. Like the FFPC, the KFFSC, you could still pick up players. We know that Allen and Williams are out. We know Carter may not play. Is there another Chargers receiver that we could look at potentially picking up and as a pick and play this week? Is there a guy that we could get afford off the waiver wire on the cheap? A guy like Jason Moore or Michael Bandy or any of those guys, or is it simply the Eckler, Palmer, and Everett show?
Yeah, I'm not picking up either of those guys because, to be honest, I don't even know which one it would be. And, I saw Parham's out too. So,
yeah,
I mean, there's like nobody. And I mean, I think it's just anybody's guess there on which guy to pick up. I mean, if you would have asked me that question yesterday, I would have told you that I had picked up a bunch of DeAndre Carter and I was playing him, but that was before the news came out. So now I think I'm probably avoiding.
The speed receiver in that Chargers practice squad is Keelan Doss, and there's another guy in there that we always loved on the show, Balky. At least I did back when he was an Eagle. Is John Hightower, the sensation from Boise State. I can remember 3 or 4 years ago when I was guesting with you on the show, and we talked about Gabriel Davis. We said, Gabriel Davis had never done a thing. Get him in your lineup. And he goes off and gets 30 points. From week to week, it's a whole new season. And, it's next man up football, especially on bye weeks and with the injuries we've had this year. If you're going to buy into a long shot, there's a couple names if they get added to the roster.
This guy does not need to be added to the roster, and it's Taysom Hill. And Kevin in Weehawken, New Jersey has this to say: is Taysom Hill more than just a Monday night pivot if Mark Andrews is inactive? That is Kevin in Weehawken, New Jersey. Thank you, Kevin. Mark Andrews has not practiced yet this week. Certainly not looking good for him to play. Now, you say like, oh, okay, so this is what you do. If you can't get Isaiah Likely in FFPC leagues, and quite frankly, I checked my KFFSC leagues, you can't get Likely anywhere. He's already owned there. So what about Taysom Hill? What if you have him? Is he a guy that you can play if Andrews is inactive? Now, I have a couple of bids on teams I have Andrews on Jawan Johnson, where I can deploy him in case Andrews is inactive. But John, Taysom Hill, obviously you're going to play him on Monday night if you don't have any other options and Mark Andrews is inactive. But what about Taysom Hill if you're not in the Andrews situation? is he a guy against Baltimore that you could flex out in a Football Guys type league?
Yeah, I mean, given the situation with tight end, I mean, he's a gamble, but I mean, to me, Taysom Hill's always around tight end 10 right now. I mean, I'm not putting him much lower than that. So, and given everyone that's on bye, I mean, he's viable. Although, I mean, I do have like I think 3 or 4 teams where I have Hill and Andrews, and I'm going to use it as just I'll sub in Andrews if he plays, just so I can set it up that way. My other ways to get Andrews in look like they're gonna fail because I picked up Demarcus Robinson and now looks like he's hurt too.
Mm-hmm.
No,
So,
I'm telling you, like if you're not on bye, you're probably dinged up, and that's just the way it is. And
Yes.
I'd like to say, I want to paint a rosy picture, guys, but I was looking at this before the show tonight. This is one of 2 weeks where we have 6 teams on bye. Now, this one might be a little bit more lethal, given the fantasy prospects that we have on bye this week. But as I look at it, and I thought I had it up, maybe I closed the window.
you say that, but the other one is league championship week.
It's week 14. That's what I wanted to bring up. Yes. So the talent might be more significant this week, but man, week 14 and it's. I look at it. I'm going to bring it up right now because I don't want to. I don't want to just keep bringing this up and
bring it up, Balky.
Yeah, no, I don't want to keep bringing it up and not have the teams up, which is why I want to do. Okay, so I got
Denver's on bye this week.
Yes, thank God. Right. The Falcons and the Bears on bye in week 14, as well as the Packers and the Colts. The Saints and the Commanders are the other teams. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, no Kamara, right? No Terry McLaurin. You won't have Pittman. You may or may not have Jonathan Taylor, whether he's healthy or not. The Packers have been underwhelming, but obviously no Aaron Jones that week. The Bears, okay, no Montgomery, but outside of that, what are you missing?
Claypool.
Well, Claypool, yes. Yeah, we'll see where he's at that point. The Falcons, I would say, oh my God, no Kyle Pitts and no Drake London, but Arthur Smith treats those guys up there in a bye week every week, so it doesn't really matter with them. So I think like this week, as far as talent goes, it's a little bit more significant, especially with those Broncos, Farrell, on bye. What a horrible outcome that all my teams are going to have this week. We will not have a horrible outcome to this interview because John Terry is going to enlighten us with his answers to Farrell, your final question of the evening.
Oh, John, it's the toughest question in fantasy football, especially when a gentleman of your stature comes on and all the names we've discussed. But I've still got to have a first-round bust, one we haven't talked about, or not necessarily a first-round bust, but a weekly starter bust. And then I've got to have a sleeper. And I've taken all the receivers off the Chargers, so you have no sleeper there. I've got to have something. What are they going to be? A guy not in your lineup and a sleeper that for the 10 or 15 people that are listening and not talking about horse racing or baseball will be interested in hearing that.
And just as a friendly reminder, John, I know you guys probably have not realized this. I have. The Broncos are on bye. So you cannot utilize any Broncos sleepers this week.
Good to know. Well, I will say, given all the bye weeks, I mean, I don't know that there's any first-round players that you're going to put on your bench. But if I'm picking one to underperform, I'm going to go Derrick Henry this week.
Oh,
only because I think the Chiefs are going to put up a good game against them, and I think it'll take Henry out of the game plan. So we'll see. But I mean, if you have Henry, you probably still got to play him. But beyond that, if you're looking further down the list, I'm not starting any running backs named Robinson. I'm benching both James and Brian. As far as a sleeper, and this is mainly because I still have to do some more pivoting, and I was looking into it. But my sleeper this week is going to be James Prochet on Monday night.
Spicy. I like it.
He's little. He can run around and get open. How many targets? Do you think they're just going to be high-quality targets?
Yeah, I mean, Lamar can unload the deep ball to somebody. I mean, pretty much they're going to be down to him and Duvernay, right? And if Andrews sits, I mean, I guess Likely's in there, but yeah, I think he's up for a couple of big plays, and I mean, he also can get some underneath targets. I just need someone else as a pivot for my Mark Andrews teams in case he sits. So
Right.
he's not to tell everybody what I'm doing, but he's my Sunday morning bid.
I like that.
You know, we guys, and this is my fault. I didn't bring this up at all, but Rashad Bateman is out for the year. It sounds like, according to Dennis Allen, Michael Thomas is going to be out for the year. John, are you doing any? And you just mentioned Prochet, but are you doing anything off the waiver wire with any of the other Saints receivers? I mean, it seems like Jarvis Landry can't get right. Callaway's out there. Traquan Smith is out there in some leagues. Are either of those guys worth a pickup now that we know that Thomas is probably not coming back until 2023?
Yeah, they're probably worth a pickup, but I don't know that they're like an immediate plug and play, and you're going to have to see who
If
pans
you pick
out.
them up, you're tempted sometime to play them. And they've been given so many opportunities, and they play so poorly, except when you don't have them in your lineup. It is the biggest fool's gold of those two receivers that you could possibly ever have. I'm going to stay away. I would rather play multiple backup tight ends than put those two guys.
I get it. I get it. And that makes sense. Like, don't put yourself in a bad position where you have to feel compelled to start. You know, it's like some of these GMs who make bad draft picks, right? And they tell the coach, you got to play this guy. You got to play this guy. Don't throw good money after bad money, right? And I think bad money might be picking those guys up. And certainly it could help you out in a pinch, right? But if it's not helping you out in a pinch and you're weighing these guys, it may not be the right thing or the best thing for your lineup to be playing these guys when you don't absolutely have to. We absolutely had to have on John Terry on the program tonight, a guy who has a top 20 team in the Football Guys Players Championship, a guy who had 2 top 10 teams finish in the Football Guys Players Championship last year, a guy who has got almost a dozen high-stakes Dynasty Leagues titles, almost 2 dozen FFPC and Football Guys League titles to his name. Always good to rap with you, John. I feel what's the Billy Bean line from Moneyball, where he's like, good talk. Every time we converse, my love for the game is re-energized. and that's how I feel when I talk with you about this.
Balky, I look for 2028 when we're celebrating John's 100th league championship. It's within 6 years.
And we'll have him
within 6 years. Don't let me down, John.
No.
All right, sounds
We
good.
got party being planned for that.
On this show when he does. John,
Let
be
me
good.
know.
Enjoy week 9. Good luck the rest of the way, dude. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We really appreciate it.
All right, good talking to you guys. Have a good weekend.
John
Thank you,
Terry,
buddy.
ladies and gentlemen, a guy who
Love
has
that
won
guy.
so many leagues in the FFPC, so many leagues in the Football Guys Players Championship. Always good to rap with him. And once again, we are coming up on the end of the show, Farrell, and we have not answered any emails, so we will go through as many of these as we can here. Carl in Lansing, Michigan. What's up, fellas? They play each other this week, so who's the right tight end to play in week 9? Is it Tyler Conklin or is it Dawson Knox? Thank you so much. That is Carl in Lansing, Michigan. I like Conklin this week. I know it's been kind of like hit or miss with that guy. He'll have these big blowout games, and then other games he'll just be non-existent. But again, to go back to my Hawkinson theorem, when tight end has been as bad as it is, I'm willing to roll the dice on the guy who's been, really up and down from a game-to-game basis, whereas Dawson Knox he's just been okay when he's been good. I mean, he hasn't had like a 9 or 10 catch game like Conklin has. So I'm going to go with Conklin here.
Do that up or down thing again.
This thing?
Well, and down is where Knox is. He's touchdown dependent tight end. He makes nice plays. But look, Conklin 10 targets last week on a quarterback that likes to extend the play and look for that big target. Conklin's your guy here. Easy.
Ken in Albuquerque. Hey guys, has the time come to play Justin Fields over Tom Brady this week? And thank you for the email, Ken in Albuquerque. I'll bring this up. Excuse me, right now as we look at those matchups this week. So Tampa Bay gets I believe the Rams this week. No, they get, beg your pardon, they're at Dallas. Am I looking at this right, Farrell?
No,
I'm not.
you
No,
want
I'm
week
not.
9
Listen,
NFL schedule.
I'm totally wrong.
It's okay.
Good
They're
Lord.
playing Denver. No.
Yes, the Buccaneers played. It is the Rams. They
Yes.
get the Rams at home this week. Does Tampa Bay. Chicago is at home against the Dolphins. I can't remember if I brought it up on this show, but man, I love what Fields is doing with his legs. It doesn't seem like it's going away. That Buccaneers offense, even when they're at full strength, I know they won't have Gage this week, but even when they're at full strength, it seems like they just can't get on the same page. Yeah, I'm playing Fields over Brady this week.
Well, you're just crazy, Balky. You know, we've got a situation here where Fields has yet to even throw 30 passes in a game, and he's yet to complete 20. He's going to run, but he's going to have to find the end zone to overcome a quarterback who's when he had to step up against the Chiefs, Brady threw for 385 yards. He cannot help that his receivers cannot catch the ball when he lays it in just right into their hands. That's hopefully going to change, and Brady has the upside to really turn that around. Fields is coming together. The Claypool ain't that great, not yet, and all the weapons are in Tampa, and I'm not so sure that that we're going to continue to see Brady, who's thrown only 9 touchdowns against 1 interception. We're at the halfway mark. I think as we go through the rest of the season, Brady's going to double up on those touchdowns, and then you're going to be rewarded for starting Brady. So, yes, you must start Brady over Fields.
As a guy who owns Brady in several leagues with not a whole lot of options behind him, I certainly hope you're right, because I could use a big game from Brady against the Rams this week for sure. Let's keep talking about the Bears here. Pat in Big Cabin, Oklahoma. I don't know if that's the name of the city or if that's just where he lives. Is it nuts to want to start David Montgomery's backup, Khalil Herbert, instead of the starter in Washington, Brian Robinson? He says, good luck in week 9, Pat, in his Big Cabin in Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not nuts. I could definitely see it. The way that the Bears have been running the football lately, it's really weird, Farrell. You look at, I think there's some similarities between the Bears rushing game and the Falcons rushing game. Two teams that don't necessarily have positive game scripts for their running backs, yet they seem to do very well rushing the football on a week-to-week basis. So, yeah, I mean, I could easily make the case for Khalil Herbert over Brian Robinson this week. Say what you will with Antonio Gibson, but he's creeping up into the snap count a little bit more. He's being more involved in the passing game, and that takes away from Brian Robinson. Push comes to shove. I don't have to make this decision on any of my teams, but yeah, I think on a couple of them, if I had Herbert v. Robinson, I'd be playing Herbert over Robinson in a couple of leagues.
Yeah, and if you have Herbert, you've got to quit looking at the depth chart and start looking at the results. 563 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6.2 yards average per carry. You can't deny that, putting that in your offense. He's on a pace to do less than 200 carries, but gain 1,000 yards. This is the player that you've got to put Herbert in your lineup over a lot of other running backs. He's in the top 20 in rushing yards in the league.
This is the final email I think we have tonight as I go through them here. I think it's the last one. Okay. This is Will in Denver, whose Broncos are on bye this week, just to point that out. Do I play Zay Jones against the Raiders or Hunter Renfrow against the Jaguars? Thanks in advance. That's Will in Denver. Another question we have this week, where 2 players are going against each other. The Raiders and Jaguars going at it in Jacksonville this week, and that is a 1:00 game. So you look at this game here, Farrell. I don't know what's going on with the Raiders offense. It seems like Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Adams, they should be doing better than they are. I don't know if it's because Josh Jacobs has been running hot or whatever. It's very, very difficult for me to say, yeah, let's play Renfrow when he hasn't really put it together at all this season. Zay Jones already has a couple of really excellent games. I'm going to lean towards Zay Jones here.
And you can, and you would be legitimate in leaning that way, especially after last week when the team did not the team didn't get – you could talk about Jacobs being successful this year, but the team did not get offensively past the 50-yard line. They didn't even get into – they were never on red zone. You just
Right.
think the game has been stopped, and fortunately we didn't have to watch the game. But the players have had similar years. Each has an outlier game. Zay Jones has a game with 10 catches this year when other receivers were hurt. They're both fill-in players. They both don't seem to have a lot of history this year or even last finding the end zone. I would dig into my roster and see if I could find another player if I really needed to score some points here. I'm going to go with the home team. Both quarterbacks have been erratic, but we're talking a lot about Derek Carr. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in his last 4 games. October has been a nightmare for Trevor Lawrence, and despite the fact that he has Travis Etienne playing at one of the highest levels of any running back in football. So 2 great running backs, very successful running backs getting their opportunities this year with quarterbacks that are struggling. This is a very strange game. It's another 1:00 start. I tried to blame the Raiders' slow first half on their 1:00 start for a West Coast team, but I don't think that carries much water. That team's got a difficult situation that they got to straighten out real quick.
You bring up red zone on a sidebar here. I have a buddy who actually, Farrell, you met a few years ago at Mile of Music in downtown Appleton in Northeast Wisconsin. And he has gotten very much into betting on games, and NFL games. And he is convinced that red zone has a vendetta on whatever game is on Fox, because they never show the Fox game on red zone. Like whatever game is on Fox in our local market here, they never show it.
Conspiracy theorist. And what's his name?
His name is Matt. Okay.
Oh yeah, I remember meeting that.
Right,
Yeah.
really tall guy, drink water.
Tall guy.
So I said, I'm like, if you think they're never showing it, when you think like they're in the red zone or stuff's going on, just flip back to that game.
No, you can't turn off. You might get a commercial.
No. I encourage it, and that's what happens, Farrell. It's on commercial, or they're at midfield, or the team's. I'm like, there is no vendetta.
There's no vendetta. No. They're going to show. They're going to show all the. They're going to show all the scores.
Yeah, and we show all the fantasy analysis on this show, and much of that is due to you, good sir, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Check out Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at kffsc.com. A gentleman, a scholar, and not a bad fantasy football player. We'll do this again next Friday, dude.
See you then, buddy.
All right, Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen. Always good to talk fantasy football with him every Friday night. Always good to talk fantasy football with all of you every Friday night here at 10-9 Central. I want to thank John Terry. I want to thank Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for watching, listening, streaming, downloading, however you're consuming this content. We appreciate it. Shout out a couple of birthdays today, David Shaw and Justin Cox. Justin Cox, who was just on this show probably a couple of months ago, and David Shaw, who's made a couple appearances on this program as well. They're celebrating their birthdays today. Happy birthday, gentlemen. We are back next Friday, 10-9 Central. The 9th place team in the Football Guys Players Championship, John Donadio, will be our guest. That's going to be an exciting interview. Very looking forward to talking with him as we get you set for week 10 of the FFPC and the Football Guys Players Championship. Watch the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown or listen to it, rotoviz.com/podcast, in case you missed it from Tuesday with my guest, Greg Pignatelli. Good stuff from him there. Want to remind you that we will have a brand new High Stakes Lowdown this coming Tuesday. Again, 10-9 Central is what we're shooting for on Tuesday nights for the HSLD every single week, so you know exactly when to tune in. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network goes live Wednesdays at 10-9 Central on the Better Sports Network app, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter with yours truly. And coming up this Wednesday, Josh Hayes, who you know him from SiriusXM Fantasy Football's Rotoballer Show and rotoballer.com. He will be my co-host on that program as well. Don't forget to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 9 edition. $35 gets you in. You can play for $200 and potentially win a 2023 FFPC main event. All you got to do is beat 9 other people, and you are in the big dance next year to play for $1 million. Only one player per team in that format. You can play in a 10-team slam. You can play in a 12-team classic with the kickers and defenses. It is totally up to you. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified of all these FFPC videos that we put out. Don't forget about the weekly preview show. I should be promoting that more with our guy, Dave Terpoli, and of course, Aiden LaCorey. They give it to you live every Sunday morning, getting you set for all the action right here on the FFPC YouTube channel, so you know exactly what you should be doing with those tough start-sit decisions that are coming up. Maybe not so tough this week. You're just playing the guys that aren't on bye with 6 teams on the bye-mageddon this week. So hopefully the ball bounces your way. Good luck in week 9, everybody. Certainly hope everything works out for you as you maintain your push to the playoffs in the FFPC main event, the Football Guys Players Championship, the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship main event, or whatever leagues you're playing in. We're just so glad you're tuning in. For advice from the best players in the world, like John Terry, for Farrell Elliott, I'm Eric Balkman. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. And we'll talk with you again next week.
Not sure how many of you are college football fans out there, and I can't remember if I brought this up last week or not, but my brother works for the University of Wisconsin, Madison, the home of the Badgers, and he gets free tickets for select Badgers games throughout the year. I was able to finagle a couple of tickets from him a couple of months ago for the Wisconsin-Maryland game tomorrow, which, of course, Wisconsin welcoming in Tua Tagovailoa's brother, Talia Tagovailoa, who is the quarterback for the high-powered Maryland Terrapins offense. Was going to go with my buddy Matt that I just mentioned with Farrell, and he cannot go because he found out he has to coach his son in a grade school basketball tournament. Was going to bring my son, a nine-year-old son, but I did not want to bring him to the game because there are 40-mile-an-hour gusts of wind, 20 to 30-mile-an-hour winds most of the day, and a lot of rain. I didn't want him to be miserable on his, for his first game ever go to the Badgers at Camp Randall Stadium, legendary Camp Randall Stadium in beautiful Madison, Wisconsin. My mother then decided she was going to come, and then she sent me the text message on Thursday night saying, yeah, I won't be offended if you find somebody else. And then Friday morning, this morning, she sends me a text message. I'm sorry, I really want to go, but I can't. And we had a big group phone call today. Does anybody want to sit in 40-mile-an-hour gusts of wind and rain to watch the Badgers and Maryland play in probably an inconsequential game in the Big Ten? And it was a resounding no. So for anybody out there who thinks that all Wisconsin football fans are crazy and will sit through anything, any type of weather to watch their team play, I can give you proof positive that is not the case, as I will be sitting underneath a blanket in my couch, in my basement, watching the game tomorrow, taking in the game via TV rather than in person. Just a lesson for you out there. Don't stereotype all Wisconsin sports fans. Good luck in week 9, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll speak with you next week.